Doctors, therapists of Reddit, do you have any "no, that's not normal" stories? If so, what abnormality, habit / oddity did the patient have thinking it was normal? I had a patient with a cut in his mouth casually say, "You know when you're chewing on some glass and..." I had to stop him and ask for clarification. Apparently, after he finished a bottle of beer, he would just bite into it. He said he liked the feeling of chewing on the glass. Nice guy though. To address a request for more context, I was a paramedic student using a clinical rotation in the ER. Guy comes in complaining of bleeding, more than usual. I don't know if it was Pica thing, but he did admit to frequently and recently prior meth use. Wait, are you his therapist or his doctor? I don't know which I prefer. I was just an EMT at the time. No one else was answering the question and I thought my story fit. I have always had trouble breathing during exercise, but my mom said I was just lazy and called me the family couch potato. I always had a cough that would linger for months after a cold or flu. So in general, I coughed all winter. My mom called it a winter cough, and don't worry about it. My college roommate was worried about my cough and recommended I go to the doctor. I was like, "Oh no, it's just a winter cough." She was like, That's not a thing. Yeah, turns out I have permanently damaged lung from years of untreated asthma and pneumonia. I had a co-worker in college who had been coughing for a while, and I was trying to get him to the doctor. At some point he said, "It's not that bad, it's just like that feeling when you just can't quite catch your breath, you know?" I said, "No, Jacob, I don't know, that's not normal." And eventually he let me drive him to the campus health center. He had pneumonia. I am a doctor. A guy came in complaining about constipation and back pain. His main complaint was constipation, as his back had been hurting for years and it had gotten so bad he can't get out of bed anymore and seldom eats. I get a bad feeling and order up some lab work. It comes back and it's like good with a few hiccups, but nothing unusual for a man in his age who hasn't been to a checkup in years. Bad feeling persists and I order a full body scan on him despite having no actual evidence of anything. And it's cancer. Every single bone in his spine was full of tumors. Really scares me as I've had back pain at this moment. I have this like 30 years though. And constipation, diagnosed as IBS, and colonoscopy last year. Nothing unusual, so likely okay. Poor guy. His intestinal obstruction was caused by worms. When asked after surgery if he had seen any worms in his stool, he replied, "Only the normal amount." This one's my favorite. Only the normal amount? Sir, the normal amount is none. One time I was talking to a doctor during a routine checkup. He asked about sleep disturbances and I said I was sleeping fine. Though occasionally, just as I was about to doze off, I would hear a loud bang or a scream or some other sudden noise that would wake me back up. He asked if I experienced any other sensory disturbances, and I said sometimes I would smell words. Long story short, it turns out a meningitis infection when I was a child left me with mild brain damage. I get the bang thing when I sleep sometimes. There's a word for it, but I forgot. I heard it's common though. Maybe I should see a doctor. But what's it like to smell words? Varies. I assume it's like synesthesia, but I'm also assuming that happens all the time and in a predictable way. The smells I get are always 100% true to life, but I can feel when they're in my head and bypassing my nose. I guess it's similar to Tourette's in that I have no idea when they'll hit or what will trigger them or what I'll smell. Also, the words don't have to be spoken. My own internal monologue can trigger it. Generally, it's if my own thoughts that set it off, there's a closer match between the word and the smell, and sometimes I get a taste as well as smell. Well, I'm the patient here, but my doctor was very surprised when I thought everyone takes 2 hours to get to sleep every night. I had assumed for years that my asleep in half an hour parents were the outliers. Same! My mom can fall asleep in minutes and my sister can sleep literally anywhere. But insomnia runs in my dad's family and unfortunately I inherited some sort of sleep disorder. It takes me forever to fall asleep if I'm not drugged or stoned out of my mind. And typically I can't sleep for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time. I thought it was normal for years. I'm pretty sure I've been chronically sleep deprived most of my life. Lol, FML. It took me until 16 to finally realize having a swollen and tangled vas deferens on my left testicle wasn't normal. It's called varicocele, and it affects about 15% of males. It's caused by poor blood flow and only excess blood in the veins leading up to it. Luckily, the only downsiders are a bit of an ache and a 15% smaller left testy. Makes me wonder, cause my left testicle always gives me a little pain and I just ignore it, and sometimes I feel the pain down to my knee. Patient here. I was very young when I had my first period, single digits. They were okay until I hit 10 and had 100% days period. That was super heavy, like 4 to 6 pads an hour. Went to the gyno and was told it was normal for women to have this happen. 20 years later, still getting the 100 plus days periods, I found out that it's PCOS with a dab of endo. Please tell me the gyno is no longer working in the field. Not a doctor, but one of my classmates in college casually let this out in a discussion that she didn't get glasses for years, as she thought everyone had blurry vision and it was normal. I have loose shoulders. I can pop them in and out of their sockets with no effort. Sometimes it's more effort to keep them popped in. I found out this wasn't normal in my high school health class when we were learning the dangers of drinking and using drunk goggles to simulate how alcohol affects your vision. We all got handcuffed after, and I was able to slip my arms in front of me with no issue. I have loose hips. For the longest time I thought it was normal that when I moved my legs in certain ways that there was a bit of a clunk or a shift in the position of my upper thighs. I have since learned that this is very likely my hips popping out of their joints. I can also rest my chin on the inside of my collarbone, which I never thought much about until I realized how much it freaked my wife out. I have been given a diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, luckily for one of the sideshow freak variants, not the ones causing serious health conditions. I've literally been told by a consultant geneticist that I'm not normal. Luckily, I'd already figured that out by that point, or else it might have been a surprise. I'm not a doctor or a therapist, but I had a moment like this about my own life. I didn't know I was allergic to kiwis until I was 17. I was having a conversation with someone and brought up the fact that kiwis made your throat close a little when you eat them, and they looked at me like I was crazy. I had to ask a few more people before believing that I was actually allergic. I made a grapefruit pound cake recently, and my SO mentioned that tingling feeling you get in your throat from eating grapefruit. I literally just stopped and stared for a full 30 seconds before suggesting they're most likely, at least mildly, allergic. I was the patient in this. I have gotten stung an abnormally large amount of times from bees as kids. Every time the spot would swell up and double the size, i.e. if I got stung on my hand, my whole hand would double in size. It would be red and hurt for like a week, and then become super itchy for another week, in total lasting about 2 weeks. I thought this was normal and what happened when everyone got stung. Even when I went to see an allergist and they told me I was allergic, I still thought it was normal for bee stings to be like that. It wasn't until my friend told me that when she got stung, it looked like a mosquito bite and goes away in 2 days, that I realized my reactions were a little extreme. Adding to the food allergies train. Since I was like about 3, I began to complain that I felt like I was going to throw up. From what I'm told, this got me 3 weeks out of daycare before my pediatrician brushed it off as lying for attention. As I grew, I whined every day that my stomach hurt. My parents, listening to the doctor, would tell me I had to go to school no matter what. One doctor literally word for word said to my father, "Off the record, I've seen this before. If you ignore her, it'll go away." I was 16 at the time. At 19, I go to my first adult physician and break down crying. I can't deal with this nausea and pain every day. I can't do anything except walk around my house carrying my bath bowl. If I can't figure out how to make this manageable, I'm going to kill myself because I just can't take it. Fast forward 8 weeks, 3 hospital visits, 2 medications, and 1 minor operation. I am diagnosed with celiac disease and gastroparesis, paralysis of the vagus nerve. In addition, because they were left untreated for nearly 2 decades, I had jaundice from my liver failing. My kidneys were functioning at 70%, anemia, severe malnutrition, multiple polyps, and literal fungus growing along my intestinal tract because food literally sat there until it became rotten. TLDR, started complaining of a tummy ache at 3 years old. Complained continuously for the next 16 years, straight until a doctor actually listened, was diagnosed with celiac and gastroparalysis. A ton of complications.